Well, it's been a year since Resident Evil 3 Remake released. So much has happened since the game's release. 2020 felt like an eternity, and likewise this game feels like it's now several years old. At the time of RE3R's release, I wasn't really a Resident Evil fan. I had played a little bit of 4 when I was a kid, and I had also played in the past Resident Evil 5. But my experience with that game really turned me off the franchise, and I never had any interest in playing the series again. But regular viewers of the channel will know that I did enjoy some of the films, and any knowledge I had of the games was from research into the series based on things I had seen in those films. I always found the series lore fascinating, so whenever I was introduced to a new concept, I would look into the source material to learn more. I completely missed the release of RE2 Remake in 2019, and I had no interest in playing it and didn't really think anything of it at the time. That was until December of 2019, when the announcement trailer for Resident Evil 3 Remake was released, starring Jill Valentine. I instantly fell in love with her character design, but didn't know a lot about her as a character. I knew she was one of the protagonists of Resi 1 and that she had her own game, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and I also remembered her from Resident Evil 5. But my main exposure to Jill, like with everything, was the film series. She was my favourite character in those films, and I had always wanted a spin-off with her because I thought she was so cool as a kid watching Resident Evil Apocalypse for the first time. Say what you will about those films, but Sienna Guillory as Jill Valentine was a fucking serve. I decided to play through Resident Evil 2 Remake prior to RE3's release, and I really enjoyed my time with that game. I loved the gameplay, the level design, the game's protagonists, Leon and Claire, but for as much as I loved my experience playing that game for the first time, it wasn't until Resident Evil 3 that I became a fan of this franchise. Since then, I have played through RE3 Remake 3 times and have also played Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Revelations, and am going to continue working through the rest of the games this year, and of course Resident Evil Village when that comes out. Now let's get into the game itself. This game caps off the remake trilogy, I guess, with the original Resident Evil being remade back in 2002. The game is a survival horror, a genre I will admit I don't have a great deal of knowledge of, but this one is much more action focused than the previous remake. The game has a third person over the shoulder perspective, which as much as I loved RE7, I just prefer to play my Resident Evil games in third person. There are several hub areas where the main gameplay focus is taking out the zombies, solving puzzles, and a lot of backtracking in the environment. Not as much backtracking as the previous remake, however, as this game is a little bit more linear, with only really one large open area of Raccoon City to explore. But there are a few smaller linear environments where there is a bit of backtracking involved, as well as the RPD, a returning level from RE2 2019. Obviously there is more to the game than that, but if you broke it down to its basic components, that's pretty much about it. Oh, and of course this game came bundled with a multiplayer entry, Resident Evil Resistance, which is a game I have played a lot of on and off over the past year, and I do really enjoy playing that game, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So what was it about Resident Evil 3 that won me over, that Resident Evil 2 didn't do? Well, to put it simply, it was actually the characters and the story more than the gameplay. What can I say? I just love this version of Jill Valentine. Her design is very reminiscent of Reboot Lara design, which I think plays a part into why I initially fell in love with this character. For me personally, I prefer this redesign. It's nice to see something a little bit more in line with her other mainline Resident Evil appearances here. Comparing her outfits from RE1, Revelations, and RE5 to the original RE3 outfits, I think the redesign just works better. I also like the redesigned model based off Sasha Zotova, even though she has a weirdly striking resemblance to Mila Jovovich from the films. What really made me fall in love with this version of Jill though was her personality, as cliche as that sounds. She is a confident, highly skilled, intelligent badass who has the attitude to match. She doesn't take anyone's shit, and I love it when Jill delivers these sassy one-liners to the characters she interacts with throughout the game.
Go. We can use this to stay in contact.
I know what a radio is.
I also think a lot of why I love this version of Jill comes down to the performance from voice and motion capture actress Nicole Tompkins. Nicole's performance is perfect in this game. From a performance standpoint, she hits all the beats perfectly, and I feel compared to what I have seen from before the remake, this portrayal of the character is so much better than in the previous games where I find the performances a bit stiff. Nicole brings a certain charm and feistiness that gives this character a personality that leaves you with the impression there is so much more going on under the hood. So much yet to be explored with this character. There is a depth to the performance that I just didn't get from Revelations. I also adore the chemistry between Jill and Carlos in this game. The way both actors convey the arc of that relationship is fantastic. From the distrust between them at the start with Jill's jabs at Carlos to what eventually evolves into playful banter and a genuine connection as the game develops.
I'm with the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. UBCS for short.
Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? You guys are the ones who caused all of this.
Whoa. What are you talking about? Look, we're just here to help people. What's wrong with Umbrella?
What's wrong with Umbrella? Oh my god. You mean the alley that's on fire?
Maybe. Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames.
Fuck you.
I'm not gonna die on you and leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay. Carlos!
Hey, I told you I couldn't leave you in a Carlosless world. That would just be too cruel.
While they don't have a lot of scenes directly together since they spend most of the game apart, whenever those two are on screen together or having dialogue over the radio, it was definitely a highlight of the whole experience. I'd love to see more of these two versions of the characters. If we could get an animated movie or even a spin-off game or something, that would be great. I feel like Jill has become this forgotten character in the franchise, since in canon it has been an absurd amount of time since we last saw her. I really want to see Jill return, hopefully in Resident Evil 9. I also love how Carlos has a full character arc in this game, which from my understanding wasn't in the original. The other big contributing factor to why I enjoy this game the most is its length. RE3 takes about 5 or so hours to complete first time round, and honestly I think that's a great length. I know this is more of a personal preference thing and isn't really the popular opinion, but to me the experience is worth more of my money than the length. I will always prefer a solid, shorter experience than a bloated 100+ hour RPG filled with garbage filler content. I'm talking about Assassin's Creed here. The shorter runtime means this game is also a lot tighter, with a more linear style of gameplay than the previous one. This is good for newcomers like myself as it provides a more streamlined experience. The levels themselves have a more linear design, and while there is still backtracking in this game, the levels are shorter and smaller, and you spend less time in each space. This game obviously has the bigger action focus, which means there is plenty of zombies and monsters to kill, and plenty of action set pieces, and the levels are designed to cater to a more fast-paced style of gameplay than the slower survival horror of RE2. For me, Resident Evil 3 was my game of the year for 2020. The reason for this was because in my view it was a solid mix of character and story, level design, and engaging gameplay. I also think it balances the action and the survival horror elements well enough. Maybe not for the hardcore fans, but for me it was fine. But overall, I enjoyed every minute playing this game, and it's also easily one of the best looking games from last year as well. The RE engine always looks great, and this game is the perfect entry point into the series. The game wasn't received well by fans, and I can understand why, but without having something to compare it to, this game holds up pretty well on its own. With all that said, it's not perfect of course, and there are some criticisms that are worth addressing. There isn't really resource management in this game. There are so many enemies, but equally there is so much ammo lying around that you never feel like you are going to run out. There are only a few moments of tension throughout the game. The hospital sequence was really the only part of the game that even remotely felt like RE2 in its gameplay structure. This also feeds back into the level design. The environmental horror is lacking compared to 2, and comparing to the level design of RE2, it is very clear that this was dumbed down, and even what little puzzles there are pale in comparison compared to RE2's puzzles. In RE2, you spend literally half the game in the RPD, and there are so many areas that are locked off until later, with a lot of backtracking to collect items and solve puzzles. There is more engagement with the environment. This is why I think I prefer the gameplay style of RE2 more than 3. The biggest issue I feel is Nemesis. After playing RE2 and having Mr. X stalk you for most of your time in the RPD, it was really terrifying, and as a player it made me really nervous walking the halls of the RPD, hearing the echoes of his footsteps. The last time I felt like this playing a horror game was Alien Isolation, for very much the same reasons. There is one section of RE3 where Nemi follows you around, and he is really easy to avoid if you know what you're doing. The rest of the game he's just relegated to scripted boss fights, which, while the boss fights themselves are cool and engaging, compared to the experience of having Mr. X just show up, getting in your way while you are trying to solve a puzzle, Nemesis just fails to live up to that. And I do enjoy his boss fight encounters, however the last one was a real letdown. Unless you're playing on the most difficult level, it is more of a glorified QuickTime event than it is a boss fight. But overall, I know some hardcore Resident Evil fans have problems with this game, and I understand why they do. But for me, I really love this game. It's a game that I can see myself playing over and over again, and if you know me at all, you know I love me some outfit mods, so there is plenty of reason to keep playing this game. I am, however, really glad I did play this, because up until this game's existence, the Resident Evil franchise was something I wasn't prepared to jump into again. I had thought for years that it just maybe wasn't for me. But I guess in my case, it was more of an acquired taste.
No shit.
Resident Evil 3 might be a shorter experience, but what content that is there is really good. Resident Evil 3 will forever hold a special place in my heart, and I'm looking forward to playing more Resident Evil games throughout the rest of the year. Maybe one day I'll play the original game, but for me, this experience will always be my Resident Evil 3. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I've been wanting to make a video on this game since I first played it last year, and I haven't really seen a lot of videos on the internet with the perspective of a new Resident Evil fan, so I'm glad I was able to bring my own kind of spin on this. This is the last video I'm going to be making in this format, since this was a nightmare to put together, and moving forward, I'm going to be changing up how I make my videos. The content's going to be staying exactly the same, it's what you come to expect, but just a bit of a new format, so I'll reveal more about that in the coming weeks. But if you guys did enjoy this video, then please make sure you leave a like and subscribe for more content. It really does help the channel out. And if you haven't checked out my podcast, the Turning Point podcast, the link is in the description below. We just did an episode talking about Justice League, and it ended up being an interesting discussion, so that's a bit of a good time. The links to all my socials and everything are below as well if you want to keep up to date with my videos, podcasts, streams, all that kind of stuff. I should be coming back to streaming soon, I think, probably at some point during May. But yeah, anyway guys, thanks for watching, and bye for now.